Welcome to You Matter in Business. Your hosts today are Ariel, me, and Miriam.
Your heart, your brand story, and your success because you matter in your business.
Welcome to You Matter in Business. This week we have a special guest, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to solo team it today because Miriam has more important things to do with her family today, which is perfect because that's important. We believe that from the core. So we are welcoming Kaitlin Healy. She is a powerhouse at Dynamite, and I met her, goodness gracious, almost 2 years ago, maybe?
Oh, I think maybe a year ago.
You think so?
I
Yeah,
mean,
maybe a little bit
I
more than that.
I started at the chamber in September of 23.
Okay. So we met through the local chambers.
Yep.
And she was a incredible force to that community, but has kind of veered off into her own little world now. And it's exciting. So she's going to share her expertise with us. So this week, we're going to talk about the importance of communication, specifically in the business environment, and how that will help us in the long run and in the short run. So, Kaitlin, before we go into that topic, tell our audience a little bit about yourself, about your background, besides the little bit I just clipped, and your experience and kind of how you ended up changing directions to where you are right now, and then tell us where you are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me.
Yeah.
What's my journey? So I guess I'll bring it back to college is a good place to start. So I went to the University of Florida and graduated in 2014, my degree being in family, youth, and community sciences. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do in the world of being a professional, but the idea of helping people has always been the thing that has attracted me. So I took on that degree with the initial intent of perhaps becoming a high school guidance counselor. And so I got my degree. I moved to Brooklyn, New York, where I was born, and I lived there for 4 years. I spent time working as an operations coordinator and an office manager for a charter school. So getting a taste for what's it like to operate in the school system as a professional, and quickly realized that working not so much with the children, but working with their parents who are not in alignment with your expertise in helping their children was a battle I was not prepared or willing to face. So I then decided, well, I still want to help students. And I decided maybe I can do the guidance counselor thing at the collegiate level, but take it on a more mental health approach. So I went to grad school for a few years at Stetson University for mental health counseling. I was working as an admissions counselor there during that time. So my recruiting skill set really started to come into play. And, through doing that work, doing my own personal therapeutic work, and then going through the program, I was like, this doesn't feel quite right either. But I still needed a job. So I pivoted to recruiting for professionals. So I was doing some work for a government contractor. Then I pivoted over to healthcare, doing recruiting for employees. And that didn't pan out. And so then I did some reflection and thought, I've had this entrepreneur bug and I haven't really given it the time of day. And I come from a family where no one's an entrepreneur. So I didn't really have anyone to bounce these ideas off of. So I thought to myself, like, where can I find these people? And I knew one of the local resources was the Chamber of Commerce. So I went to a meeting and I stood up and I said, I found myself unexpectedly unemployed and I think I want to be an entrepreneur. I have no idea what that looks like or feels like. And I just want to learn from people. And the long short of it is a job opened up there and I took on that job. So did that for about 15 months, and all of my recruiting skills from my various jobs really helped me, but it allowed me to start having conversations with business professionals and small business owners, senior leaders in larger organizations. And through it, I met the gentleman who would become my mentor and who is now my business partner. And it was he who really introduced me to this concept of coaching as a professional, business coaching in particular. And as of January, I've taken the plunge. We already have a shared client, which has been so much fun. And I'm just eager for more of it. I'm getting hung up on the administrative and the advertising. And I ultimately want to build a business that's referral based, but we'll talk more about that. But yeah, that's a little bit about me and where I am today.
Okay, so would you say that your last of us, our
You
journey
muted.
was not straight?
There we go. I'm sorry. You muted and unmuted. What was your
Sorry.
question?
If I touch my mic, it goes off. So
Gotcha.
it's annoying, but occasionally
Good.
that happens because I'm very animated. So since your path that you've taken so far has been very curvy,
Yes.
so it's been very adventurous. I find most people do that when they look back, especially someone with an entrepreneurial soul, because they're kind of trying to find not just a job, not just a place to make money, but it's part of their identity almost. Like if their heart is not fed, then in the process of work, then it's like, I'd rather do something else. So you are very much that kind of a woman. So how has that journey, and you did talk about it a little bit, but your experience with some of the previous positions set a good foundation for what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think my previous positions have given me a lot of skills that I implement in my coaching. For example, when I was working at Stetson University in the admissions department, one of the expectations is that we were able to give a 30-minute presentation in a kind of a conference room area to prospective students and their families. And on occasion, when the student ambassadors were not able to give the campus tours, that's an hour and 15-minute walking tour of the campus that is narrated. And so that really gave me the skill of public speaking, presenting, not so much the ad lib, like we were able to influence our own stories and experiences, but I was one of the few recruiters who was not a Stetson student. And so I just kind of would sit in on people's presentations and kind of take what I like, leave the rest, and just demonstrate value through communication in that way. The nature of recruiting is all interviewing, whether people realize it or not. And I'm grateful, especially for my time at Stetson. It really helped me learn to navigate recruiting and interviewing with integrity. There were significant number of instances. I worked as the transfer recruiter, which I think is an important asterisk to call out, because most people, they apply for a college, they go through the admissions process, they go for 4 years and they graduate. I was working with the untraditional students. Sometimes that was a student who went to a big 50,000 student university down the road, and they really just struggled academically. They weren't finding a social community, and, probably immediately put on probation, or sometimes just like flunked out their first semester and needed a place with more structure, small community. Sometimes I was working with people in their 30s who were navigating the GI Bill. They had served our country and now they wanted their education. So it was really important to just do a lot of sitting and listening and active listening, and listening to not just the words that are being said, but what is the spirit and the emotion and intentionality of what is behind the words. And the instances I wanted to refer back to, sometimes students would come to me and they'd say, I want to be a nurse. So I want to come to Stetson and I want a nursing degree and I want to go be a nurse. And my directors would probably kill me if they ever listen to this podcast, but I would be very transparent with those students and say, this isn't the place for you. I don't want you here. Not because I don't want you as a person, but because we don't have a nursing degree here. And my higher ups would probably say, come get a biology degree and then we'll transfer you to another school and then you'll get the BSN. But that I knew was not in the best interest of these students at whatever age they were. And it taught me, and I carry this in my work now, that doing right by the person in front of you ultimately protects your reputation, even if it doesn't get you the sale initially up front. And doing the hard conversation and saying this isn't right for you would also free up my time to work with people who were a right fit.
Yes.
And at the end of my recruiting cycles, I usually had one of the highest retention rates in my class. So we get someone through the application, they enroll. Well, now they actually have to start. and they have to matriculate through their first semester. And when we look through those numbers, I had really high numbers, and I attribute it to the fact that I wasn't just trying to push people through a funnel. I was trying to really understand, is this even the right funnel for you to be in? And so that helped me a lot in my admissions roles. It also helped me in my professional recruiting, because if this isn't the culture of an organization that you want to be in, if we don't have the benefits or the schedule that works for you, if the commute's not right, all of these things matter, because maybe a 40-minute commute each way to a single person, oh, no big deal. But if you're a parent, maybe you have multiple children, you have a second job, you have a side hustle, all of these things kind of play into the role. And then when I think about my time at the chamber, it's a little different, because I think every business can benefit from community and more people to communicate and bounce ideas off of. So it was a little more pushing through the funnel, but I have a strong conviction that community is helpful to anyone. And the price point to the value that is offered there was a pretty easy sale in my eyes.
You brought up an interesting point that I think is worth talking about. And it falls in the line of the value of good, clear communication and the purpose of communication. So if you were going to say what the purpose of a funnel theoretically is, a sales funnel, marketing funnel, whatever that is, right? Because you talked about funnels through recruiting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a process you take someone through. What is the actual purpose of that funnel or that communication with the funnel?
Yeah, I think that all communication is about clarity and alignment. And if we are rushing through parts of a communication series or a funnel, then we might get through. So in my line of work as a business coach, if I am not doing my due diligence, and my model typically is maybe a 30-minute discovery call, kind of understand, hey, this is a little about me, a little about you. Based on that conversation, okay, you've identified some pain points perhaps in your organization or opportunity areas that you're not able to achieve the height that you're looking for, the quality you're looking for. Great. Now I know, let me come in for 90 minutes. Let's do an assessment with your team, on average, maybe 4 to 8, maybe max 10 people. Then we get through that conversation, and I do a lot of listening. I give a few prompts, and then I really just sit back. I observe body language. I observe the words that are being chosen, how someone's given someone the side eye, perhaps. Someone's got their arms crossed. Someone's deciding to be on their phone instead of engaged in the conversation. And all of that starts to signal to me, is this a team, not now just the senior leader, but is this a team that is going to be willing to take on the challenge of coaching? And then typically after our 90-minute strategy session, I'll have like a 1-hour debrief with either the solo senior leader or maybe 1 or 2 people. And from there, we can have a really honest conversation of, I can show up, but I'm not responsible for your result. You're responsible for your results. And I need to make that abundantly clear, because then if we work together for 6 months and you don't see the results you want, you come to me and you blame me and you want to fire me. Meanwhile, I've come to every lesson. I've given you your curriculum. I've provided you accountability. I've connected you to other resources, to mentors, to other coaches in my network if we're not a right fit. All of that to say is, putting people through a systematic series of communication is doing due diligence that protects you as the business owner. And it also protects the client, and it makes sure that there's alignment long-term for a successful relationship and transaction, whatever that looks like.
Okay. And you had mentioned before the fact that it was, you spent your time on the right people. And I think that's worth talking about a little bit with your clients, because part of the purpose of that funnel is to do just that. If I'm pushing people through, what am I then going to do with my time? I'm going to be wasting time. I'm going to be wasting their time and my time, because I'm forcing people through a funnel rather than naturally having the people who don't fit funnel out.
Exactly.
Which is what a funnel is all about. So we want those people who don't fit to basically naturally funnel out. And then as we, nurture the relationship, the funnel gets smaller and smaller, because we only want the people we spend time with are the people who really see our service, see the value, and want the value. and need the
Absolutely.
value, right? It
Yeah.
solves a problem they have, right?
Yes. And it solves a problem in a way that works for them, you know? So
Exactly.
so I'm a part of an organization, System and Soul, based out of Atlanta, Georgia. There's about 50 of us who are affiliated with the organization. And, you know, even within those 50 people, I am the right coach for some clients, and I'm not the right coach for some clients, but I know someone who is. Some people have an approach that is more faith-based. Some people have an approach that is really tied to diversity. Some people are passionate about serving women. That's one of your passions and goals, and I know the same is true for Miriam. And so I think when we listen, it's good for our business when we get someone to a place in the funnel where clearly they are not a right fit and we pull them from the funnel. But I think what we do, and this is going to sound kind of harsh, but what we do with the rejects from our funnel is still important, because even if I'm not the right fit for that person, if I nurture that relationship, then I still have a relationship to come back to. And even if that business is not the right fit for me as a client and I refer them to another coach in my organization, well, then they start thinking, you know, I can go back to them in 3 months. Hey, how is your coaching relationship going? Based on your coaching and now how you see how our model works, would you be willing to refer someone in your network to work with me, or even refer someone to your current coach? And I think that all ties back to your reputation being of great value, and just like that service leadership, embracing it for yourself, you know, like you're not doing yourself a service when you shove someone in the funnel, have them sign the contract, and then 3 months later they want to renege. And then what, you really want to hold a piece of paper to someone and go, well, you signed it. I don't want to do business that way. I've done business that way for a lot of my life, working in large organizations and following the rules. I want to be able to follow my own rules, have flexibility where I need it, but ultimately I just want to continue to align myself with people who are just trying to improve and have the difficult conversations that are needed to make a lot of those breakthroughs.
Yeah. Growth requires work and sometimes a little pain,
Yeah.
but that is the way it works. Just take a moment for a slight interruption. We wanted to share some exciting news.
Exceptional women professionals often struggle to communicate their expertise. Rediscover, refine, rebrand women's retreats provide a transformative, intimate experience that help clarify your unique identity, so you are self-confident and courageous, stand out in your industry, and enjoy effective marketing.
Join us on one of these retreats. Go to arielfaith.com and choose your date that fits your schedule. Reserve your exclusive spot with a simple deposit, and then enjoy tailored planning tips and details from us to get ready for this inspiring experience. In the meantime, if you can like, share, and comment on this podcast, we'd appreciate the love. Thank you. Has anything surprised you about stepping out on your own, going from a regular paycheck to a non-regular paycheck? Has anything shocked you about this whole entrepreneurial thing that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, there's definitely some things that have caught me off guard. I don't know if shocking is the word, but I will say, like, being a solo entrepreneur, way more emotionally taxing than I would have initially thought. My job at the chamber, to a degree, as my CEO put it, like, you're running your own small business within a business. So I had a book of contacts, and I was calling and following up, and I got to work pretty independently, but I still had 5 people in a building that I was getting to spend time with every day, and seeking feedback, seeking support, accountability, things of that nature. And now that I'm 3 months and 16 days into my entrepreneurial journey, I'm finding that it's hard to be motivated when I don't have people to celebrate with. And I do have a partner, and I do have like my system and soul coaches. And I think I'm just still so new that I feel funny reaching out. So I'm putting a lot of judgment on myself. But, you know, the pleasant surprise is I have taken initiative to put together kind of like a roundtable, a monthly roundtable for some coaches here in Central Florida. And the thing that surprises me in like the sweetest way is this past roundtable we had was on my birthday, and everyone was just like praising, like, oh man, if I could go back and like be where you are now, this is great. Like you're so far ahead. Like I think I'm probably 10 years younger than at least the second oldest person like in this group. And meanwhile, I'm over here like lashing myself, like do more, be better. And everyone else is like, you're way further along than any of us were in our journey. So I think I'm just calibrating my perspective and my expectations. And I think there's always room for growth. But yeah, it's a beast. Like when you're in your own little mind, like in this little echo chamber. And if you don't take the time to break out of that and get outside perspective and support, it can get kind of dark and lonely. And so making sure I'm prioritizing that, and rather than waiting to be invited to someone else's group, I just decided I'd make my own group, kind of build it and they will come.
Build it and they will come. Very
Yeah,
good.
or guilt them into saying, "Hey, it's my birthday. You can't not show up this time."
Okay, now we interviewed Manny back a few episodes ago. I don't remember the episode number right off the top of my head, but so our audience may be familiar with Manny and his system that he talked about, which you
Yeah.
also talked about, the system and soul framework. So what do you consider to be, in terms of developing better communication skills, the most powerful part of that system for business development and growth that our listeners could benefit from?
Yeah. So there's a study that our CEO has referenced, and I don't recall exactly who conducted it, but a large leadership kind of spirited organization did some research on what are the skills that make leaders effective. And we could start boiling those down to like communication and time management and things like that. But he was looking more at like intrinsic operating
Emotional
systems
intelligence
and values and things like
Mhm.
that. So they ultimately identified these 10 attributes. But what's interesting is that of these 10 attributes, two of them on average make up to 77% of your success. So if you can just lock down these two things, you're 77% of the way there to being a successful leader. And those two things are the concept of being, one, inwardly sound,
Okay.
and two, others focused.
Okay.
And so there's some language that we go through. There's kind of like these 6 talking points now under these two umbrellas. Like, what does it really mean to be inwardly sound? And what does it really mean to be others focused? And, you know, part of it, like I personally like I scaled myself, graded myself on these 6 dimensions in these 2 areas. And I looked at others focus and I was like, oh, A, like maybe A minus, B, but overall had a really strong average. And I think that ties back to, college, like getting this degree in family, youth, and community sciences and working in schools and thinking mental health and recruiting and interviewing. Like all of this is a common thread that's super obvious to me. And then I looked at that inwardly sound chart and I went, ooh, buddy, we got some work to do. And not like, skating Fs across the board, but it really demonstrated to me that if I'm not in line with myself, if I haven't identified my own core values, if I'm not taking care of my physical, mental, and emotional health, if I don't have a social network, and ultimately, a lot of those things tie into communication and being able to ask for help, which I am historically very challenged at. You can't go a line. A lot of coaches say in my business coaching and in my life coaching arenas, you can't take your client any further than you yourself have gone. So you've got a little interruption back there. I don't know if you need
I do have an interruption. So keep talking for a couple seconds.
Sure. Yeah. When I think to, if you want to be a mountaineer guide and you want to instruct someone on how to climb Mount Everest, but you've only climbed 80% of Mount Everest. You can't hit 80% and then be like, okay, like I'll wait here for you, like go climb the top of the mountain. You really have to be able to make sure you're not only talking the talk, but that you're able to walk the walk. And as a coach, I think a lot of what we do is walk alongside people. We offer encouragement, we offer accountability, we offer, I think just most importantly, a safe space to we pose a question and then we just hold space and silence for people to ruminate on ideas. And I don't know how I went off on this tangent, but all of that to say, with like respect to all of that playing into communication, it's about courage, ultimately, I think, which I'm really learning about. And asking for help isn't about failure. It's about saying, I recognize I'm at 85% and I want to be at 100 and I don't know what's keeping me from getting there. And then making sure you're aligning yourself with people who have most likely walked that journey, or maybe they're in the midst of walking it and you can walk it together. Yeah.
One thing that I think we learn automatically as we age, which, you're on the younger spectrum. So you're learning this by mental education, right? But we learn it by living it. There comes to a point where you are don't sweat the small stuff is an old book, but you start picking your battles. You start identifying what you're willing to put energy into and what you're not. And it's not even, I don't know if it has something to do with the fact that, the older you get, the more time you realize you're running out of. You spend all your time and energy focused on your children and your family. And then you get to the point where they're all grown and your life shifts. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, now what? Right.
What have I built for myself?
All those transitional phases of life really do help kind of solidify that one that you talked about, that internal piece, so that out of the gate, that's what we've worked on. We've spent the last 20, 30 years working on that. So not through learning, through life.
Through living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I believe you can learn both ways. I just think you get a deeper level of understanding as you pass through them.
Oh, definitely.
And that's true about everything in life. As long as you have that growth mindset that there's more to learn. In fact, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. So to me, it's like a never-ending like goodie jar that just doesn't empty.
Yeah,
and empty, it'd be boring.
And that makes me think of the concept, like, how do you know you've learned and mastered something? The highest level of knowing that you have latched onto a concept or an idea is if you are then able to turn around and teach it to other people. Like, that is mastery. Like, I am so confident in my knowledge and my understanding of something that I can turn to the person next to me, identify how they best learn, and then educate them, and then make sure that they can demonstrate or communicate back to me, like that check for understanding. And that again ties right back into to communication, because we can be doing it ourselves and then someone can be watching us and be like, oh, like I want a slice of what that person has. That's kind of the mindset I had going into working for the chamber. Like, these people are doing what I want to do, like, and not, I own a printing business or I'm a life coach or a photographer, but they're running businesses. And how can I do that? I need to find someone who is doing that and ultimately, ideally, hopefully, is willing to teach me how to do it. I just got really lucky that I found someone who was willing and they're doing the work in the exact industry that I identified that I wanted to take a chance at. And now that I've been doing it, I'm so glad that it's the path that I've gone down.
Awesome. That is so good to hear. Miriam and I often talk about the fact that clear communication is kind of the key to both personal and business relationships. And clarity for me might be different than clarity for you. So it's very important that we understand that mutual clarity, right? So can you give our listeners an example without obviously sharing personal detail, but where you have seen clear communication, whether they're learning to be better listeners or whether they're learning to be more clear in their speaking, has really helped your clients And then what advice would you give to our listeners about really working on developing assertive communication rather than the two not so positive ones?
Yeah. So I think of an example with a client that we have, and I think it's a trap a lot of young leaders or managers fall into. They think they are responsible for being the problem solver. And in reality, you are there to be the lamppost, which I'll explain in just a minute, to that person so that they can become resilient. It's sort of that we fall into giving someone the fish and we're not teaching them to fish sort of thing.
Yes.
So I'm going through a life coaching certification at the moment with an organization called the Limitless Institute, and they're based out of the like Maitland, Orlando area. And one of the tools that we are learning to practice as coaches is the lamppost. And I think it's something that every good leader can tap into. Maybe not to the extent that we do it in life coaching, but I think there's a place for it. And so a psychology or mental health study was done many, many years ago. And it was this premise of if you just went to the park and you sat on a bench and there was a lamppost next to you and you just vented to the lamppost for 1 hour a week for several weeks, what would happen? And on average, people felt a lot better. And so the message that I take away from that in the business sector as a leader, you might identify that there's a conflict between two people, there's a he said, she said situation, and we're just jumping to conclusions and we're writing people up, and you didn't even get this other person's side of the story. And so while it is at times time consuming, if you as a manager can just bring someone to your office or you go to their office, like there's time and place, which is really important, and just say, hey, like something's come to my attention and I'd really like to just understand better. What can you tell me? And then the lamppost, this exercise is you sit, you don't emote, you don't nod, you don't, yeah, okay. You sit in pure silence and you are just this still blank slate for this person to just get out everything that they need. And and it's really powerful. Like I got to be the guinea pig in our class. And when you just hold space for people, which I know there's like that running gag of like the Ariana Grande and she's holding the finger and she's holding space or whatever. Pop culture reference. But there's something really powerful about just recognizing like I'm here and I'm here to help you get right with you, because no one can help you do that besides yourself, with the exception of like creating time and space and safety for people. So I don't know if that answered your question.
It does actually,
Okay.
because I think it's talking about learning to be an active listener, learning
Mhm.
to actually take it to another level, which is a little more, to me, my understanding of active listening involves not necessarily agreeing, but acknowledging, right? Whereas
Yeah.
the lamppost just stands there and does nothing. Whereas
Yes.
so there is a balance between those two somewhere. And depending on in a work situation, I see the lamppost having because you're not the therapist, you're the boss, So there's a
Yes.
point where that listening with that non-emotional state is better in a workplace because you're not allowing the emotions to rule. You're allowing the situation and the things in the situation to then teach you to go direction A or B,
Yeah.
with the
And
situation.
and to your point of active listening, like the lamppost isn't always appropriate. It's definitely situational and probably not super effective in the workplace unless like your organization is aware of like, hey, we're going to try this skill. I'm telling you about it. Let's give it a go. But yeah, I think active listening is, those moments like if you're communicating something, then getting a check for understanding. Based on what I shared with you, what did you hear? Or someone gives you information and say, hey, I want to make sure I understand what you said and where you're coming from. Then you reframe, well, not
Yeah.
reframe, but you kind of repeat back in your own
Mirror
words and
back. Yep.
summarize. This is what I've heard. Is that correct? Like, am I 80% of the way there? Am I 100% of the way there? Like, let's kind of do that volley back and forth. until we're aligned. An example we use with our clients is, Miriam, I'm ordering us lunch today. What do you want? And you say, I want a turkey sandwich. And so I hear Miriam wants a turkey sandwich. So I go to the store, I go to Publix, get a pub sub, and I get, turkey on your sandwich because you wanted a turkey sandwich, but then I put mustard and olives and jalapenos. And then I come back and I hand you your turkey sandwich. And you go, this isn't a turkey sandwich. I go, yeah, it is. It's got turkey on it. Well, I didn't make sure that we had a shared understanding of what a turkey sandwich is. Because when I get a turkey sandwich, that's what I get. But when other people order a turkey sandwich, they want mayo, lettuce, and tomato. And so those checks for shared understanding, sometimes it's just one word. And someone hears this one word and it takes them to the left, and one person hears one word and it takes them to the right. And now by the time we've identified that just that one word and misunderstanding is what got us here, it usually brings up a lot of frustration. Hopefully this is a point in time where you can use some humor, which is an advanced skill, which people don't necessarily realize. I'm fortunate more times than not that when I try and use humor, it does bring levity to the room. But especially in the business setting, like, it can really ruffle feathers if it's not used properly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just making sure that the language you use is a shared language. It all comes back to clarity. Like, if you have clarity, and take the time up front. Like, when you're onboarding a new person, don't just take a week, don't take 2 weeks. Like, do check for understanding like every month for a few months. It can be a 5-minute conversation. But oh yeah, by the way, this is the language we use. This is what that acronym really means. Doing your due diligence, because also, like, when people don't feel like they're in the loop and they feel like an outsider, then you have to start worrying about retention. And that's when I put my like professional recruiting hat on, because then that lack of education up front leads to a whole new cycle of having to do it again and again and again and again. And you're taking a lot of time, money, energy. You're taking energy from your employees who are doing that cross training. So there's a lot of implications to not having clear, honest communication right up front.
Yeah. And I don't even realize, I don't believe that a lot of people realize they're actually not being clear. Because in their mind, the definition is clear. So when they use word zoo, they know what they're talking about. But the other person, when you say that word zoo based on their culture, understanding, or whatever, could mean something totally different.
Yeah.
And so you're having this conversation and it's not clicking and you don't know why until you get to the fact that, hey, you got to be kidding me. That means that in your culture?
Yeah.
Oh, now I see what the problem is. So understanding, taking the time to learn about others, it really does help in all aspects of life. Workplace, very much so, because if you don't understand the other's strengths and weaknesses, then you don't, as a team, use the strengths to build the team, right?
Yeah.
We all have weaknesses. That's just human. So if we learn to surround ourselves with people who have strengths that we don't have, then we become a good team.
Yes, ma'am.
When we see and value and, okay, I'm not good at this. Could you please take care of this? Those kind of things. So it's awesome.
Definitely.
All right. Well, I enjoyed the conversation. We are going to come back again with Kaitlin next week, and we're going to talk about some of the challenges in business and in life. A little broad, but we're going to do it.
Sounds
Are you
good.
ready?
Thank you, Ariel.
All right. We'll see you next week.
See you soon.
Thanks.
See you next episode. After all, it is your brand, your story, and your success. Because Ariel and I know you matter in your business.
Thank you for listening to the You Matter in Business podcast. Please follow, share, like, and comment. We would love to hear from you. This podcast is sponsored by Ariel Faith Photography and Enrich Life Coaching. The show notes provide more information on how to contact Ariel and Miriam and any guest speakers who share in our journey together.